Welcome to the Global Lane. I'm Gary Lane. On today's We're in the World, Paul Marshall, renowned expert on religion and politics, will talk about the dangers Christians are facing in Indonesia and the Middle East. And back on the Homefront, Erik Rosales will talk North Korea and THAAD. What future dangers does the U.S. face after their most recent missile launch? Lions, tigers, and tranimals. Oh my! A PhD scholar says he's a hippo. We'll set that straight today. And sobbing, gender-confused sixth graders wanting to identify as a cupcake? Yes, it's gotten that weird. Next, transhumans. How many millennials think it is fair that a transgender boy won a girl's race? Juan Garcia brings us that. And lastly, stay tuned for my closing thoughts on driving at home. And it all starts right now on the Global Lane. From Indonesia to Pakistan, antiquated blasphemy laws are causing the imprisonment and even death of Christians and others. Recently, the Christian governor of Jakarta, nicknamed Ahok, was jailed for 2 years because he told Muslim voters they could vote for him despite his political opponents insisting the Quran said otherwise. And in Pakistan, Christian mother Asia Bibi, originally sentenced to death for defending her Christian faith, still languishes in prison on blasphemy charges. Well, joining me now is Dr. Paul Marshall. He's Wilson Professor of Religious Freedom at Baylor University. So, Paul, does Ahok's imprisonment mean that Indonesia is moving away from secularism and democracy?
It depends on two things. One is, in this trial and the accusations against Ahok, there was a lot of political manipulation. If you get something like this on a national scale, things could really erupt. This has woken up a lot of Indonesians, Muslims as well as Christians, because Indonesia has a reputation for religious toleration, mostly deserved, and I think people were becoming complacent. But you've had radical elements growing, especially amongst the young, amongst university students, and suddenly this has now erupted forth. You had demonstrations of over 1 million people. So Indonesians who thought they were immune from the type of radical Islam you get in the Middle East have suddenly woken up and say, we've got that here. We just put a governor in prison for blasphemy. We've had mass demonstrations. So there's now, so to speak, a counterattack. The government is pushing a lot of initiatives, stressing the need for religious harmony and toleration. They've been banning some of the more radical Muslim groups. So I'm hoping this sort of counter-surge, this will be a wake-up call, and Indonesians will fight against the radicalism which is growing.
What can the United States do?
We should respond gently. The Indonesians, like almost everybody else in the world, can get, don't like other people telling them what to do. I think to raise concerns about this, to say this is greatly worrying, to push Indonesia to repeal its blasphemy laws. Christians should, particularly listen to the concerns of Christians in Indonesia. Most are doing okay, but there's regions in the province of Aceh and West Java and other places which are highly restrictive. And we should raise these concerns too with Indonesian officials.
Now on to Pakistan, Asia Bibi. She's been in prison for 8 years now. The U.S. gives about $1 billion a year to Pakistan. Do we have any leverage against them? What can we do?
We have some leverage. We often don't want to use it because we've got, thousands of troops in Afghanistan next door, and most of their supply lines go through Pakistan. We have more leverage than we think we do. I would push for, I want repeal of the blasphemy laws, but I think that's not going to happen quickly. As you all know, major figures in Pakistan who've pushed to get rid of the blasphemy laws have themselves been killed, including Shahbaz Bhatti, a very committed Catholic and the Minister for Minorities in the national government. Nobody has been executed for blasphemy in Pakistan. But people get killed in prison. They get killed by the police. They get torn to pieces by mobs. Or the jailers put them in a jail in a cell with other convicts who kill them. So I think reforming police and jails and how those people accused are treated, and the rules of evidence. I would want to concentrate on these. Under a lot of its laws, the word of a Muslim counts for more than a non-Muslim. The word of a man counts for more than the word of a woman. So if there were a Muslim and a Christian together in a room and they came out and the Muslim accused the Christian of blasphemy, his word would carry. So I think we need to look at those rules of evidence, and then the false charges which arise, people use them as vendettas against others. Then if the charge is false, they themselves should be charged with an equivalent of perjury or leading to false arrest. Then that could limit the number of accusations which are being made.
Okay, Dr. Paul Marshall, thanks so much for joining us today.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Gary.
Moving on to the home front, North Korea claims their latest missile test on Tuesday was successful and can reach anywhere in the world. The North Korea state television claims the intercontinental ballistic missile can travel more than 4,000, get that, 4,000 miles. Kim Jong-un says the test was a 4th of July gift to the United States. Nice gift, wasn't it? Well, this launch will be the highest altitude a North Korean missile has ever reached. And Japanese Prime Minister Abe says the missile launch shows the North Korea threat has increased. So this begs the question, what will President Trump do now? And why is South Korea against the defense system THAAD that is designed to shoot down incoming missiles? Well, joining us to explain all this is CBN's national security reporter, Erik Rosales from Washington. Erik, thanks so much for joining us today. So what was the range of this missile, 4,000 miles?
Yeah, it's about 4,000 miles right now. It's 5,500 kilometers, and that's what the Pentagon officials say. And that puts into it Alaska, Hawaiian Islands, even Guam could be hit by any of these missiles.
Well, where else in the U.S.? Just Alaska or, Erik, maybe the West Coast?
Yeah, that's what they're thinking right now. They're debating on whether or not it could actually hit the West Coast, such as Los Angeles, but Alaska is the biggest issue right now. And then from that, actually, the Hawaiian Islands is another issue that we have to be concerned about.
Now, the president said that he's lost all patience with China. China isn't really doing what he wants it to do. And look, we may go this alone against North Korea. What are his options?
Well, his options are, a matter of fact, yeah, going it alone. We heard that we're trying to do a diplomatic situation right now and do talks and sanctions and things like that with the help of China. But the president just recently tweeted out that China's imports the exports to North Korea are up 40%. So that is definitely not good news for the United States on trying to bring any sanctions against North Korea. So it would have to be going at it by ourselves. And how would we do that? Well, we are seeing a number of ships in the area that are going to be making their way into the area. We just had the Carl Vinson come back from that area along with the Ronald Reagan. We asked for specific ships that are in the area right now, and the Pentagon is still working on that list for us, but it is growing by the days.
Erik, I want to talk a little bit about THAAD. This is the anti-missile system. The U.S.
Correct.
taxpayers spent money to put this thing in place. They started deploying this in South Korea. Now President Moon says he doesn't want it.
Yeah, exactly. I asked Pentagon officials about it, and they said, well, the one thing that they are going to continue to do is they're going to continue with the plan to bring in more THAAD missiles. They want to be able to have a full THAAD system up in place. Right now, we have an initial system that will be able to shoot down a nuclear missile if, in fact, it is fired from North Korea. But they do want to continue with it. And you know, President Moon wants more of a diplomatic situation. He wants to be able to go have dinner with Kim Jong-un and talk about the situation, but you just really can't put all your cards in that hand because you just don't know what this dictator is going to do.
No, and that has never worked in the past. I don't think it's going to work now. One final question for Erik. I know the Defense Department had a anti-missile test in Hawaii that failed. Should we be concerned about that?
No, we should not be concerned about that. That was actually for a short to medium term missile, length missile. So the one that we actually had a success on was the intercontinental missile. That is the one that could be fired from North Korea. That is the one that we should be most concerned about. And that one was a success. And the thing we have to remember, though, is even our failures, we still learn something from these tests and be able to take something back to the drawing board to be able to work on perfecting it the next time.
Okay, Erik Rosales from Washington, D.C., our national security correspondent. Thanks so much for being with us and giving us those insights.
Thank you, Gary.
Lions and tigers and tranimals. Oh my! A PhD scholar thinks he's a hippo. Yes, I just said hippo. Lauren, please set us straight for this. What did you find out?
Okay, Gary. Well, a French PhD student from France visited the University of Arizona. He's a scholar, and he thinks he can identify as an animal. His name is Florentine Felix Morin, and he made the claim in an article that having a hippo alter ego has allowed him to, quote, navigate the world free from the constraints that govern human bodies. You know, this guy is also gay and transgender, so he was born a female, and he decided that he identifies with this animal after his partner called him a hippo. And that, of course, he just found to be too endearing to ignore. So he wrote a 90-some-page journal on his new identity.
Does the University of Arizona have a tranimal class or what?
Yeah, that's the same question that I asked myself, but the college says on their website that they have a gender and women's studies department that is listed under the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences. They said Morin came from France, where he works at the intersection of trans studies and animal studies at his university in France.
And what did his journal, Lauren, say about his identity?
Yeah, I think the most disturbing revelation in this journal was this quote from Morin, where he said his new identity makes him feel, quote, cute, sexy, and confident and safe. He also went on to say, being a hippo means that I don't have to be a boy or a girl, a child or an adult, normal or strange. It means that my smile becomes a hippo smile, and the way that I carry my body, a hippo walk. And he also likes when his friends refer to his paws. LGBTQnation.com says that he's being targeted. They even mention us, the Christian Broadcasting Network, in the group of targets. And the most ridiculous part about all of this is that they say he's being targeted for his exploration of a metaphorical concept. You know, I just really can't believe that any of this is happening. And I guess they went on to say that he doesn't really identify as a hippo, but that it was just an intellectual exercise.
Paws. I didn't know that hippos had paws. And, you know, Lauren, I kind of today am feeling a little bit like a lion. Rawr.
You know, well, I think that's great for this show. I feel like I'm in the Twilight Zone right now. But it's just pretty crazy. I was shocked when I saw this.
So how widespread is this, Lauren? Future generations, we going to see them thinking they're other animals?
You know, I think it's absolutely spreading. And instead of just saying that the LGBTQ issue is growing, it's more about the absolute confusion that's spreading all over the country. You know, people don't even know what bathroom they should go into. Like, we see this here. It's a man who thinks he's a woman and wants to also be identified as a hippo. You know, I compare this to a botched plastic surgery. I mean, these people are living for the world's standards and have absolutely no idea which way to follow because they worship trends. And they don't even care that it's physically and mentally destroying their lives. You know, Genesis 1:27 makes it pretty clear. They make that bathroom decision pretty simple for people. You know, it says, so God created mankind in his own image, in the image of God. He created them, male and female. Simple as that.
Well, Lauren, it just seems like we're losing all common sense. It's all about feelings now. So how do you feel today?
You know, this was an intellectual exercise for me. Gotta say, it was a new one, but it was, I guess it was intellectual in a way.
Okay, Lauren Creekmore, thanks so much.
Thanks, Gary.
Now, continuing on the transgender confusion, Ben Carson made an excellent point last year during an interview with Katie Couric. Here's what Yahoo News released.
We have known what a man is and what a woman is for thousands of years. All of a sudden, we don't know what they are anymore. There are biological markers that tell us whether we are a male or female. And just because you wake up one day and you say, I think I'm the other one, that doesn't change it. Just a leopard can't change its spots.
You know, the saddest thing about this whole gender issue and debacle is that sixth graders are now struggling with which bathrooms to use. A Texas teacher joins us to explain and to make our audience aware. Now, we're keeping her name private at her request. First off, thank you for joining us. So you're currently teaching at a school in Texas, and your own sixth graders are gender confused? About how many are there?
Great question, Gary. So actually, since I began teaching my first day on the job, when I was introduced to my students, part of the introduction was knowing that they wanted to be referred to as gender neutral pronouns. So they wanted to be referred to as they. And in terms of how many of them, I would say it's about 50-50. I do teach at a small private school in Texas. So if they're not asking it for themselves, they're asking for someone else. But it's definitely been interesting watching all of this unfold, for sure, because I never struggled with this growing up, and I've never seen any of my friends struggle with this in the school system. And so walking by the bathroom and seeing my students just weep and mourn and cry because they don't know which bathroom they fit into today, or just seeing my students tell me to call them by a cupcake because they don't feel like they can identify as female or male and things like that.
Weeping and crying? Wow, over which bathrooms to use? That's pretty amazing. As a Christian, how do you handle this with your students?
Absolutely. So again, I don't teach at a Christian school. So my school did the best that they could with what they had. So my school actually decided to bring in a speaker that was a specialist in gender, sex, and identity. And so the specialist came in and they spoke to our students over a lunch and learn. And they told our students that sex and gender are different. Sex is something that's biological. It was given to you at birth, but gender is based on what you do. It's part of your actions. So if you feel more feminine, if your actions are more geared towards feminine actions, then you're a female, and that's your gender, and that's how you should self-identify. But if your actions are geared more towards masculine things, then you're a male, and that's what you should identify as, despite what your sex is. So my school did the best they could with what they had. Again, they do not know the truth about God and the fact that their identity comes from God because they were created in the image of God. And so the specialist came in and informed our students, and our students felt supported and accepted. And then other students were confused and said, no, there's absolutely no way that sex and gender differ. They are all the same, and it's all biological.
So why do you think this transgender issue is suddenly accelerating among children?
That's a great question. I would say that I believe that this is happening now because we've taken creationism out of the classroom. And so when you remove creationism out of the classroom, when you remove God from the picture, then you have a generation that doesn't understand that their identity is found in Him, that they were created in His image, and that they behold that. Whether it's you're a male and you behold the male figure of God, or you're a female and you behold that aspect of the Lord. And so when you remove that, you have a generation that's trying to create themselves. So again, they don't believe they were created, so they're going to create themselves in whatever way possible, whether it's identifying as an inanimate object, or identifying as an animal, or identifying as male when they were born female, or identifying as female when they were born male.
And I've got to ask this, Texas? The last place on earth, I would guess, for this to happen. Were you surprised?
Great question. I would say I'm not surprised that it's happening in Texas. I do live in the Metroplex, so if you look at Austin, Houston, and Dallas, it's more liberal compared to the rest of Texas. But again, this is a spiritual battle. It's definitely hitting at our identity. So the enemy is roaring around like a lion, seeking who he can devour. And it doesn't matter if you're in conservative Texas or if you're in liberal California. He's going to hit to the heart of the matter. And if he can tackle students' identities now, then when they're older, they're going to still be struggling in this. They won't understand what their purpose is, and they won't move into the fullness of what God has for them and created them for. So of course, he's going to do it in conservative Texas to try to bring that confusion.
This year, a transgender athlete beat all the girls at a Connecticut track state championship, but would have placed last against the boys. Is this fair, and will we be seeing more cases like this one? Do you think it's fair for her to compete with the sex that she identifies with?
That's a really good question. I'm like a very open-minded individual, and I support her.
She should be allowed to play whatever sports she wants to with that gender she identifies with.
That doesn't look fair. That doesn't look fair to me. I mean, you can compete as if you're a sports person, then you should know what gender you are, where you belong.
I don't think that should have anything to do with his sexual orientation. If he identifies as a female or she identifies as a female, she should absolutely get to compete with the females.
Oh, I'm afraid I don't know enough about that to have an opinion on it. I'm sorry about that.
Either way, like whoever you identify with is fair. I mean, I don't think you should ruin someone's dreams just because of like who they identify as.
It's kind of hard for me to say a specific yes or no
That's a very difficult question. And it gets even more interesting. What happens when the Olympics come? Should guys be allowed to participate, the females, in those sports?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes.
Like the Olympics is everyone coming together, so maybe it'd be good to have that, but I don't know. So a lot of people would disagree with it.
Would you be willing to sign this little petition for me to play women's basketball at the collegiate level?
If you identified and then had, like, went through procedures to transition to a woman?
I don't know.
So maybe I could take a breather to think it over a little bit.
I would sign for you to go on the women's basketball team if you're using female pronouns.
Yes, ma'am. You heard that? I'm in. Now here's something else to think about since you're a bio major. What if I had a daughter, right, who trained, you know, as a track star all her life, right? And she knew she was going to be up against another Andrea, a guy who identifies as a woman. Would it be okay for me to inject her with steroids to get her testosterone to match Andrea's levels?
No, I don't think injecting testosterone, I just don't think it would be necessary. I don't think, I mean, I guess Andrea has more testosterone levels, but...
So that means it's unfair that Andrea gets to compete against the girls.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Juan, I'm really shocked by those comments. Were you surprised?
Actually, Gary, not at all. But what did surprise me was how people weren't able to communicate what they thought was right. I mean, I'm all for being inclusive and making everyone feel equal, but we really need to think this through. Can we afford to pay the cost, and do we really want to face the consequences? First, it was safety, and I'm referring to the North Carolina bathroom ordinance where, you know, we allowed everyone, or hypothetically allowed everyone to go into bathrooms, but we tossed out safety. And now it's ethics. Are we willing to throw that away? Only two options could come out of this. Either a few people will get offended, or women's sports is going to get completely hijacked by men.
Well, so do you think, Juan, that we're going to see more of this in the future?
Actually, I think we will. Let's say I have a daughter, you know, and she's going to go up against a man who identifies as a woman. Would it be okay for me to inject her with steroids so that her hormones are at the same level as the man? Well, the answer is no, but someone will feel that maybe she should be, you know, because college is expensive these days, so that's something that could potentially go to court.
Okay, we're going down a very interesting road. Thank you, Juan, for joining us. Now to drive it home. No, I can't stop thinking about the now deceased 22-year-old college student, Otto Warmbier. He was a brilliant young man whose only crime was traveling to North Korea and taking a propaganda poster as a souvenir. For that, he was sentenced to 15 years hard labor in madman Kim Jong-un's gulag, where he most likely was tortured, suffered cardiac arrest, and brain damage. His curiosity and sense of adventure cost him his life. And this is what occurs in communist countries, period. This is typical treatment for Americans and Christians, I might add, in North Korea. It's pure evil. And it's time for America to wake up and see the dangers we face on the global lane. As Americans, we cannot act blind. We must define the enemy to maintain peace within our own country. Sure, many on the left would like us to believe if we're just only more accepting and offer kindness, then people like Madman Un will stop being mad. The left calls for Americans to blindfold themselves. Now, tell me this. Do you blindfold yourself when you drive to work in the morning? I didn't think so. You look straight ahead at what's coming toward you. Now, the left likes to say, if only we would understand the plight of the young jihadists of the Islamic State and stop spreading Islamophobia throughout the world, then they'd stop beheading Christians and plowing into innocent pedestrians on London Bridge. Are you kidding me? Let's look at the history, folks. President Jimmy Carter used that approach back in 1979. It didn't work then. It doesn't work now. Carter seemed to believe that talking nice to the Ayatollah would free our hostages. There was no sense of urgency or threat of military action, just indecisiveness. The Americans were held for 444 days. Some were tortured. But the Iranians took Ronald Reagan's tough campaign rhetoric seriously. They released the Americans on Inauguration Day 1981. And so it was for Donald Trump and North Korea. But guess what? It was too late. And that death is on Barack Obama's hands. Obama did not make Otto Warmbier's release a priority. There were no threats of action against Pyongyang. I guess Obama was more interested in imposing transgender bathrooms on public schools. So Warmbier he rotted in prison for 17 months. Trump talked tough against North Korea. And guess what? Warmbier was finally released. If only Obama had taken a stronger approach, Warmbier might still be alive. Now, President Teddy Roosevelt said, "Speak softly, but carry a big stick." This president speaks loudly and carries a big stick. Like Ronald Reagan before him, Trump knows that America must stand for righteousness and take action to defeat evil. Proverbs 25:26 says, "Like a muddied spring or a polluted fountain is a righteous man who gives way before the wicked." And in James 4:7, we're told to resist the devil. He will flee from us. That means we cannot sit and do nothing. America and our allies need to stick together, stand up, and confront evil, whether it be on the Korean Peninsula, in the Middle East, or right here on the home front. There is such a thing as righteous anger. The survival of our societies and Western culture are at stake. Until next time, we'll see you on the Global Lane. Be blessed.